In Midsummer Market, the members of a secret investment club find themselves the victims of murder. Can Barnaby catch the killer before he loses his pension? No. No, he can't. We're talking obsession
The stock market.
and sexy pool men on this episode of
Welcome to Midsummer.
Hello, and welcome to Midsummer, the podcast where we dissect all the mysteries, the murders, and the many weird things about the long-running hit TV show, Midsummer Murders. I'm your host, Eric Buscher, and with me as always is my co-host, Eileen Becker. Hey, Eileen.
Hey, Eric. Today we are talking about Market for Murder, the second episode of the fifth series. It originally aired June 16th, 2002. It was directed by Sarah Hellings and written by Andrew Payne. Let's check our portfolios.
Spoiler warning, we will be discussing the events of this episode, including the identity of the murderer, so if you haven't watched it yet and don't want to know who done it, pause this and go watch it. We will still be here when you get back.
And who exactly is the Hawk?
Well, he's this private detective who fights evil, and he can turn into a hawk at night. He's got this amazing night vision.
Can he fly?
But only when he's a hawk.
Extraordinary.
It's night in the well-to-do village of Midsummer Market. So, of course, someone is creeping around the home of Selwyn and Tamsin Proctor, stuffing some cloth behind the back wheel of a fancy sports car and then setting it on fire. Selwyn attempts to drive off to a secret assignation, but notices the flames and escapes just before the car explodes. Barnaby and Troy investigate, but both are distracted. Barnaby is preoccupied with an investigation into the insurance company covering his pension, and Troy needs to make sure the latest issue of the Hawk comic book stays in pristine condition. Selwyn recently bought and restored the car from its previous owner, Lord James Chetwood, the local hypochondriac, and his wife, Lavinia. Lavinia and Tamsin are in the local reading club along with divorcee Ginny Sharp, wealthy widow Marjorie Emerson, and Sandra Bradshaw, wife of the local doctor. Except it's not a reading club. They are a secret investment group, and they are doing quite well. Emerson is the leader and lords it over them all, taking swipes at Sandra for being a bookie's daughter and possibly making veiled threats to Ginny about her visits to a local hotel. She also stops Tamsin and Lavinia's request to sell some of the stocks for cash. Later that night, Marjorie investigates some noises in her home, and after she says, "Who's there?" she's murdered, beaten with her own walking stick. The next day, Lord Chetwood visits the doctor's office, and Sandra is very deferential to him. Meanwhile, sexy pool guy Harry Pater finds a wooden letter A in the proctor's pool. He shows it to Tamsin, but she dismisses it. Barnaby and Troy are called to the scene at Emerson's. The house is smashed up, and her prized silver is missing. Bullock says that bruising on Marjorie's arms indicate she was held as she was hit, meaning there were two assailants. Troy thinks it's a burglary, but Barnaby isn't sure. He never is. As the rest of the club hears about the murder, they realize they have to come clean to their husbands. Selwyn is furious, accusing Tamsin of insider trading. Lavinia tells Troy that she just wanted funds to fix up the crumbling manor, as her hubby is bad with money. Speaking of said hubby, he gets his kicks spying on a sunbathing Ginny, and arrives in time to see her hooking up with Selwyn. He also finds the missing silver, which he turns in to the police. Lavinia meets Selwyn at the Feathers Hotel to discuss selling the manor, but turns down his generous offer for sex. The detectives discover Harry used to be a stock trader, but did time for embezzlement. Harry admits his crime and says he was walking the straight and narrow path. He also tells them about the letters which keep ending up in the proctor's pool, which Barnaby realizes spells the name Maureen. They ask Tamsin who Maureen is, and she says that's her. All right, so we have a little bit of tourist info. Eileen, you want us to tell us a little bit about Midsummer Market?
Midsummer Market is home to some of Midsummer's wealthiest citizens, all of whom can afford pools. In fact, according to Barnaby, you need a mortgage to breathe around here. It also appears in the episode Death and Dust. Now, the house used for the Chetwood house is Brazier's Park, which was once owned by Ian Fleming's family, and he spent part of his childhood there. It is currently the home of the School of Integrative Social Research, which singer Marianne Faithfull, whose father was a member, described as a mixture of high utopian thoughts and randy sex. No wonder Mick Jagger spent some time with her there.
So, part of the beginning of this episode really centers around money talk. which I've got no clue. I'm not a stock market guy. I am not an investment guy. Eileen, are you knowledgeable on any of this stuff?
I'm like Ginny. I like to say, take my money and make it grow.
Well, according to the report read at the investment group's meeting, they are beating the UK index by 16%, which is good.
Yes, that is good.
Okay.
anytime you're in double digit growth is very good, actually.
I did love the concept of having a secret investment group so their men wouldn't be involved.
Yeah.
We're recording this in a post-Barbie movie world where I think we see what happens when men get control over the money.
It's a Barbie world. Unfortunately, It's not really.
I kind of like Barnaby also doesn't understand this as he's reading about the investigation into apparently the insurance company that his pension is invested in is being investigated. He's trying to read the paper and he's got no real clue what he's reading.
I think that's true of a lot of people. I mean, there is this idea that men know money and women don't, but there are a lot of women who do understand money and a lot of men who don't. And I think it just comes down to the type of education you are getting.
I did think it was funny is that there's a point where Barnaby gets really kind of frustrated and short with Troy, who doesn't understand any of this money stuff either.
No, he doesn't. And Tom seems very frustrated. And this kind of runs through. Anytime he's out of his element, he gets frustrated with things.
This is true, but why is he taking it? It's like he's taking out on Troy for something he doesn't understand.
Yeah. Maybe he thinks this young guy should understand this better, but Troy doesn't even have an IRA or pension, worrying about his pension.
Well, as we find out, he's not going to need it.
Yeah. Well, as we know, you should just invest early, put as much money as you can in as possible, and then just let it sit.
Yeah. The first half of this episode, we spend a bit of time with the Proctors, who have a very unhappy marriage.
Yes. When she says, "You leave me alone in this big house," it's very sad. And you can understand why she wants out.
Yeah. He's very controlling. Obviously, from the start, you see him running around, freaking out about leaving the lights on because it's costing money. But later on, we find out he is meeting lots of women at the Feathers Hotel for sex.
And that is not a cheap hotel.
No. Hey, man. If you're worried about saving money, I got an expense you can cut. What is Midsommer's preoccupation with these kind of weird, not conventionally attractive older dudes who seem to be having lots of sex and are also apparently very, because I believe we are also told by or Jenny references the fact that he's actually quite good at sex.
Apparently, yeah. I don't know. There is something, I think Aristotle Onassis mentioned that money was an aphrodisiac, and it seems to be true.
I guess.
I don't get it, but yeah.
Ugh. We also visit the Chetwoods. Lord Chetwood is the local gentry. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Lord Chetwood is the local gentry, but he is a mess. Massive hypochondriac. And his wife, Lavinia, I guess is suffering like Tamsin in her own way, because she just wants this normal life where she doesn't have to worry about money or a dripping house.
Yeah. Yeah, the manor is, and I have an older house, and I just replaced a roof, and I can really understand where she's coming from. Roofs are not cheap, even in a smaller house, and I can't imagine something that big and how much that roof is going to cost.
Especially when later on in the episode, when we see the massive amounts of holes.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, if a hole that big in the roof, large sections of that manor should be just collapsing.
Yeah. But this is something that you read about with a lot of these old manor houses and why they are falling into ruin, because they do have a very expensive repairs that need to be done. And it's charging people to come visit your house once a week is just not paying for those bills.
Right. I did like the doctor's line when Lavinia complains about the damp, and James never seems to enjoy it. And he's like, "Well, he's the product of 500 years of breeding. He's damp proof."
That was a great line.
There's a lot of great lines in this episode.
I thought this had a lot of really good dialogue. Yes.
Yes, it was. Can we also talk about the Chetwoods dogs?
Oh, I love the dogs.
Could have done. I could have watched a whole episode where they were just about those dogs.
I know. They were so cute, and I just wanted to pat them on the head and say, "It's okay. You can drink the water out of the buckets."
Yeah. Not the brightest of animals, which we will talk about later.
No.
So the book the investment group is reading is called Tuscan Spring by an author named Sebastian Woods. Not a real book. Although if some enterprising person wants to write what looked like a 600 or 700 page book.
Yeah, that was a big, thick tome.
And you don't have to worry, because also apparently it's not very good.
Yes. I did like the fact that the doctor read it so that he would have some connection with his wife, something to talk about with his wife. And she was just not interested. Yeah.
He really was trying to do outreach to his wife, and very clearly his wife was not that interested in having much to do with him for reasons that we'll talk about in the second half.
Yeah.
But if you're like me and you were watching this, you picked up the reason why pretty early on.
Oh, yeah.
Also, only in the first half do we meet Vera, who actually discovers the body of Marjorie Emerson. She's only in a couple of scenes, but we find out that she is going to be in charge of salads for Marjorie's garden party, her annual garden party event. And that's going to give Vera according to Vera, that gives her lots to think about right there.
Salads can be complicated.
Who was that character? She doesn't make a single bit of... She doesn't come back.
It would have been fun to have her kind of make a reappearance somewhere along the line, but this happens. They have these little village people who make a small appearance, discover a body, and then are never heard from again.
She was just, I'm here, I'm there, bye.
Yeah.
Well, because the subtext of this episode is the investment group, Eileen's History Corner will now take us to the history of the stock exchange.
Stock markets are places where securities such as stocks and bonds are traded. Bonds are considered loans, which are expected to be paid back with interest, while stocks are considered ownership shares. In the event of bankruptcy, bondholders are paid before shareholders. Investing in securities is much more recent than speculating on commodities. So what are commodities? They are agricultural products such as corn, pork bellies, or frozen orange juice, or other materials such as gold, iron ore, crude oil, and coal. Since ancient times, speculators have been betting on whether the market for commodities will go up or down, selling what would later be called futures based on this speculation. The oldest mention of selling goods at an agreed-upon price for a future delivery goes back to the Code of Hammurabi, a Babylonian legal text from around 1750 BCE. Joint stock companies emerged in China around the 8th century. Initially, these involved an active partner and one or two passive investors. These eventually expanded into large pools of investors with profit sharing and reduced risk. In 12th century France, courtiers de change traded and regulated agricultural debt on behalf of banks and are considered the first brokers, people or firms who arrange transactions between buyers and sellers, usually for a commission, kind of like bookies. In the 14th century, the millers who ran water mills along the River Garonne formed the first European joint stock company, the Society of Moulins de Buzacle. Shares were considered excellent investments, and dividends were paid in flour from the mills until 1840, when they were paid in cash. During the late Middle Ages and Renaissance, the Italian city-states, especially the maritime republics such as Venice and Genoa, became rich from their trade between Europe and Asia. They established colonies along trade routes and around the Mediterranean and financed many of the Crusades. Government bonds were also issued. Contracts were entered into that gave a percentage of the profits of individual trade journeys to an investor and a lesser percentage to the traveling trader. Investors would spread their risks by investing in several different ventures, as the odds were low that all the ships they invested in would sink or be looted by pirates. Before the 15th century, there were no physical stock exchanges, so men would meet at inns or coffee houses to trade securities. In Belgium, the Vanderborst family of Bruges ran such an inn and acted as brokers. In 1409, the market square became the formalized setting for transactions. In many parts of Europe, variations on the Bourse name has come to mean stock market. The earliest joint stock company in England, the Company of Merchant Adventures to New Lands, was founded in 1551 with 240 shareholders. It became the Muscovy Company when it received a royal charter, granting the company a monopoly on trade between Russia and England. The Royal Exchange in London was opened in 1571 by Queen Elizabeth I. Initially, this was just a commodities exchange until the 17th century, when the stockbrokers were finally allowed in. The East India Company was also granted a monopoly on all English trade to the East Indies in 1600. 2 years later, the Dutch East India Company was the first publicly traded company. The company sold stock on the newly established Amsterdam Stock Exchange, considered by many to be the first modern stock exchange. These companies were different from previous ones as they did not depend on the outcomes of a single voyage, but on the overall performance of the ships and the trades they made. The Virginia Company of London was chartered by James I in 1606 in order to colonize a portion of the east coast of North America. Investors financed the ventures in expectation of profits from the new colonies. The London Company established Jamestown in Virginia, the first English settlement in the Americas, and eventually improved its profits by developing sweeter strains of tobacco. Selling shares in profitable companies became very lucrative, and speculative bubbles developed. One of the first was tulip mania of the 1630s, in which the prices of the prized bulbs soared and then crashed as the market became saturated. The South Sea bubble crashed in 1720, when investors realized that the company was making no profits on its monopoly on the slave trade to areas where England was at war. The London Stock Exchange was founded in 1773, the Philadelphia Stock Exchange in 1790, and the New York Stock Exchange in 1792. The New York Stock Exchange quickly became the most powerful in the U.S., as well as very wealthy. Stock exchanges developed around the world with varying degrees of oversight and power, but the New York Stock Exchange remains the most powerful. By the late 1800s, the telephone, telegraph, and ticker tape had revolutionized stock trading by making the prices available in 30 seconds to far cities and ramping up the speed of transactions. The open outcry trading floor became embedded in our cultural language. The stock market would crash on occasion, wiping out fortunes, and serious government regulation of the market was implemented in the U.S. in the wake of the 1929 stock market crash that led to the Great Depression. In 1971, NASDAQ was founded as the world's first electronic stock market. The London Stock Exchange implemented electronic trading in 1986 as part of a widespread deregulation of the UK financial markets. In 1998, NASDAQ became the first stock market to trade online and attracted many new companies during the dot-com bubble, which fell 78% from its peak in March of 2000. The NASDAQ did spur modernization of the New York Stock Exchange, which introduced handheld computers in 1995 and an electronic hybrid market in 2007. There are 60 stock markets around the world, making the rich richer and confusing the rest of us. Many have consolidated to strengthen their presence and take on the powerful New York Stock Exchange. Their buildings attract protesters on occasion, especially those protesting income inequality and global warming. As Tom Barnaby discovered, paper stock certificates have been replaced by electronic records of stock ownership. The modern stock exchange is fast, electronic, accessible, global, and vulnerable to being wiped out by a mutant fungus apocalypse. Yeah.
What?
You didn't have to do all that research.
What? I'm awake. That was fascinating. My brain is not built for certain things.
To be honest, until I did a lot of that research, the most I ever knew about the stock exchange was from what I saw on Trading Places.
All right, let's look at our cast highlights for this time. Caroline Harker played the suffering Tamsin Proctor. It's all in her genes. Her parents and sister are all professional actors as well. She's a graduate of North London's Central School of Speech and Drama and made her first screen appearance in the show Chancer in 1990. She's appeared in Middlemarch, The Madness of King George, A Touch of Frost, Hannah's Helpline, and most recently in 10% and Toast of Tinseltown. Her sister Susanna also appeared in Midsummer Murders in the episode The Black Book. Fun fact, the family are direct descendants of Joseph Harker, a London theatrical designer who worked with Bram Stoker and is the namesake for Dracula's character, Jonathan Harker. Dilys Leigh was the disappearing Vera Hopkins. Leigh made her stage debut at the age of 14 in the play The Burning Bush, playing a boy. A year after that was her film debut in Throttle True. In the 50s, she performed in a Broadway production called The Boyfriend. While in New York City, she lived with one of her co-stars, who became her best friend. That friend was Julie Andrews. Also, while she was in New York, she dated a young, handsome, unknown actor named James Garner. She went on to have a long career on stage and screen and was known for her comic performances. She appeared in 4 Carry On films, as well as the series Chintz, which she also co-wrote. She's appeared in Holby City, Coronation Street, and The Commander Abduction, which was her final role before she passed away in 2009. Barbara Lee Hunt was our lovely and warm Marjorie Emerson. She trained at the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School before joining the actual Old Vic in London. She won an Olivier Award for her performance in An Inspector Calls. Her first on-screen performance was the TV show The Recording Angels, followed with appearances in Henry VIII and His Six Wives, Tumbledown, Inspector Morse, Billy Elliot, and her final performance in the Reese Witherspoon film Vanity Fair. But she made movie history in 1972 when she appeared in Alfred Hitchcock's second-to-last film, Frenzy. In that film, she is brutally raped and strangled, making the first time Hitchcock included visible nudity in one of his on-screen murders. Now, her murder in that film is a brutal and shocking act. Her murder in this episode? You see it coming. Christopher Ravenscroft is Dr. Rupert Nobody Listens to Me Bradshaw. Ravenscroft also trained at the Bristol Old Vic, but before he trained to be an actor, he studied law. But he acted in a few students' productions and got bit by the bug. He's performed with the RSC, appearing at Julius Caesar and Twelfth Night. On screen, he's best known for playing D.I. Mike Burden in the Ruth Rendell Mysteries. He also appeared in Kenneth Branagh's Henry V, A Mind to Murder, The Football Factory, The Man Who Knew Infinity, and The Crown. Anton Rogers was hypochondriac Lord James Chetwood. Rogers studied acting at the Italia Conti Academy and the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts, Lambda. His first appearance on stage was at the age of 14, and his first film role was in 1948's Vice Versa in an uncredited performance. He was a gifted comedic actor who appeared in the comedy series Fresh Fields, French Fields, and Made of December. He also appeared in The Prisoner, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Son of the Big Banther, and his final performance in You Can Choose Your Friends. He passed away in 2007.
Angela Thorne was the sensible Lady Lavinia Chetwood. She was born in Karachi in 1939 and lived in India until she was 5. Back in school, she ended up training for the theater at the Guildford School of Music and Drama. She was nominated for an Olivier Award for her acclaimed comedy performance of Margaret Thatcher in Anyone for Dennis? On screen, she's appeared in 3 Up, 2 Down, The BFG, Noah's Ark, Bright Young Things, Cold Comfort Farm, and To the Manor Born. She was married to Peter Penry Jones, who appeared in the Midsomer episode, The Electric Vendetta. The same episode featured her son, Lawrence Penry Jones. Her other son, Rupert Penry Jones, is an accomplished actor who has never appeared on Midsomer, so what's he really done with his life? Sadly, Angela passed away this past June. Now we have several return visitors this time, starting with Rupert Vansittart, who played arrogant jerk Selwyn Proctor. We talked a bit about him when we covered The Axeman Cometh. He also appears in the Dogleg Murders. You've seen him in other shows like Outlander, Game of Thrones, and The Crown, as well as the films Braveheart and 4 Weddings and a Funeral. Jesse Birdsall was sexy pool guy Harry Painter. We also discussed him a bit when we talked about Small Mercies. Birdsall began appearing on TV shows as a teen, known for his rockabilly style. It even got him an uncredited role in the film adaptation of The Who's Quadrophenia. He also was in El Dorado, Bugs, The Bill, Footballers' Wives, Hollyoaks, and Holby City. Serena Gordon played Attracted to the Wrong Guy, Ginny Sharp. She also appears in Midsummer Life. She's a RADA graduate, where she became best friends with the actress Jane Horrocks. Her first on-screen role was in the miniseries Queenie, followed by appearances in Tumbledown, After the War, Kinsey, Golden Eye, The House of Mirth, and most recently in Marcella. Eamon Gagin appeared in the role of Barman. In the following series, he's in Painted in Blood, where he graduates to having a name, Mike Weatherby. He's a character actor who also appeared in V for Vendetta, The Bill, Casualty, and A Touch of Frost. His first film was the Shirley MacLaine film Madame Susaska, in the role of specialist roller skater. This is Jay Smith's first of 2 appearances as a police technician. The second is in Murder on St. Mally's Day. He's a character actor who's probably best known for the Scottish TV series called Take the High Road, in which he appeared 95 times in the role of Peter Craig or Mr. Craig. His Midsomer Murders episodes are his final filmed roles. Looks like he's retired, or waiting for a Take the High Road reboot. Oh, and that beautiful soprano voice you hear in the episode, that belongs to Catherine Bott. You can also hear her singing in Death of a Hollow Man. She's a respected singer and TV presenter in the UK. Her voice can be heard in everything from The Dark Crystal to Attack on Titan.
Our village star this time goes to Gerda Stevenson, who played good with numbers, bad with reality, Sandra Bradshaw. In 1999, she was hailed by The Scotsman as Scotland's greatest actress. Now, she's also a graduate of RADA. She's appeared on stage in Phaedra, Streetcar Named Desire, Othello, The Seagull, and Frozen, among many, many others. She's a huge stage actress, way more than she does screen. But on screen, she has actually appeared in Braveheart, The High Life, Heartbeat, and Shetland. She's also an accomplished published poet and playwright whose plays have been performed all over the world. She's done a number of adaptations for BBC Radio, including The Heart of Midlothian by Sir Walter Scott. In this episode, I thought she gave a very subtle, layered performance, leaving you sort of wondering about her motivations until the very end when she just gives her performance the extra edge of creepiness.
Yeah, I really like her. I think she's a real standout, and she's one of the actresses that people remember. They may not remember her name, but they remember this performance a lot, and she's often regarded as one of the standout characters in the series.
Yeah, she doesn't really have a lot of stuff that you can watch on screen, but she does seem to be much more happy on stage or doing her behind the scenes writing. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I think if she had done more film, I think she'd probably be an even bigger name than she is now.
Yes, I agree.
She's that talented.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a break here, and we're going to be back in a moment with the second half of Market for Murder. And we're back. Let's talk about the second half of Market for Murder.
Make the phone call, Troy.
Well, Tamsin is Maureen, or Maureen is Tamsin. She grew up in a rough part of England and knew she had to get out. Unfortunately, she got pregnant at a young age and had to give up her child for adoption. Eventually, she learned to present a more refined image and married Selwyn. But he's a control freak who doesn't want kids, and she regrets giving up her son, so she joined the club to get some money to leave him and get her son back. She claims to have told no one about her past, but clearly, someone knows. Lord Chetwood makes another of many, many visits to the doctor. So many visits. This time he says he believes his wife is cheating on him because she met up with Selwyn at the hotel. The doctor replies that he needs to stop ogling Ginny. Sandra tells Troy that Ginny had threatened Marjorie at the last party. Ginny admits to this and to going back to Marjorie's house to accuse her of sending her items from the Feathers Hotel, where she often meets up with Selwyn for sex. Yuck. But Marjorie doesn't know what she's talking about, and when Ginny brings up Marjorie's dead husband, things devolve quickly, and Marjorie starts smashing up her own house. Ginny has to grab her, which caused the bruises on Marjorie's arms. So there goes the two assailants theory. Barnaby also understands that Ginny has been getting inside info from Selwyn, as well as the hot Selwyn sex. That night, Ginny investigates a noise and finds a bunch of ashtrays from the Feathers at the bottom of her pool. As she dives in to collect them, someone emerges from the shadows and knocks her out with an ashtray, causing her to drown. Barnaby and Troy discover the body the next day. The doctor tells them that he knew about the affair, while Selwyn says that he has an alibi. Later that day, Lavinia goes to the doctor's and asks him to talk to her husband. She wants his help to convince James to sell the manor. But when she goes up on the roof to meet with some workers, someone else pushes her to her death. The detectives can't find any of the shares from the investment club, so they call in Harry. He shows them how to trade stocks online through this thing called the internet and tells them that someone sold all the shares and cashed out. Meanwhile, Tamsin tells Selwyn she's uncovered his cheating and she's leaving him. He tries to grab her, but Harry stops him. Harry also reveals he's been using Selwyn for insider trading and has done pretty well. Everyone in this episode is real good with their money except for Barnaby. Barnaby realizes that someone has accessed the doctor's records. While he talks to the doctor, Troy potters around the office and discovers that he can hear everything the two of them are saying through Sandra's headset, and that she has clearly messed with the doctor's speaker so that it's on all the time. This means she's heard everything that's ever been said in that office. Speaking of Sandra, she's at the manor and tells Lord Chetwood that they can finally be together. Apparently he said something to her 10 years ago, and she has been convinced he secretly wanted her all these years. Oh, and she killed Lavinia. He runs for it, but she finds him thanks to his dogs. Luckily, Barnaby and Troy grab her just in time. In interrogation, we get the reveal. Sandra set a feathers robe on fire in Selwyn's car as punishment for him cheating her beloved James. After the last club meeting, she returned later to Marjorie's, angry at never getting credit for her work and at Marjorie's constant digs at her dad. She witnessed the fight with Jenny and then sneaks in and confronted her. Sandra told Marjorie she will be moving into Chetwood Manor soon, and Marjorie laughs at her. But then Marjorie falls down the stairs and calls Sandra a bookie's daughter, so she gets a few shots upside the head. She was sending Jenny all the feathers items because she was flaunting herself in front of her beloved James. When she tells her to stay away from James, Jenny laughs at her. And that was all she wrote. She confronted Lavinia over her deal with Selwyn, and when Lavinia laughs, you know what happens when you laugh at her. She even sent the robe and letters to Tamsin because she found out Tamsin's history and wanted to remind her she's too common to belong in the manor. In the end, she's content to wait for James, who she believes will come around. He probably will. He's kind of nuts, too. In the end, Tamsin goes off with Harry, who tells Barnaby that even though the investigation into his pension's insurance company is over, they invested his money into a microchip factory that has been destroyed in some flooding. So Barnaby can never retire. However, Troy sells his comic collection for a ton of money, which leaves Barnaby even more depressed. All right, so let's talk about Sandra as the killer. I honestly think this felt a little obvious.
I can't remember if I immediately suspected her the first time I watched this. I think, one of the things that's happened lately is that they have these women who are crazy, but they don't seem crazy, whereas she seems at least slightly crazy right from the very beginning, which I think is at least good. I mean, it doesn't come out of left field, but you know that she's off really, really early.
Yeah, I just knew from the glasses. Honestly, no, I was like, she looks a lot like Moaning Myrtle, and I just feel like those glasses are going to come off, and that's going to be when she's the killer. I don't know. I do feel like this just for something just pinned me that she was the killer. I thought her character was interesting, is that she has a lot more in common with Tamsin, but really rejects Tamsin because they both were really trying to rise above, I guess, the common roots.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's why she hates Tamsin.
I think so. I think it's because Sarah married a doctor, which at least sounds like a very good way to move up in society. But she married someone who likes being just a village doctor and is not particularly ambitious about becoming more than that.
Yeah, he's happy at his station, and she wants more. And then I guess the one thing I had with this, we never quite hear exactly or see a flashback of what James actually said to her.
Yeah.
that sort of triggered this. Obviously she's not all there, so it could have been anything.
Yeah. I think it could have been something quite innocent or just a mild flirt, because James is a flirt.
Yeah.
He flirts with her constantly, but he flirts with, you kind of get that he flirts with everybody. That's just
He's
the
a
way
horn
he
dog.
deals with. Yeah.
He is going to watch Ginny sunbathe naked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He must have been real disappointed in this episode where she's wearing clothes.
Yeah. And Tamsin actually made it what I think Sarah thinks is a much better marriage, because she's the wealthiest. She's married to the wealthiest man in town, even though she's very unhappy in this marriage.
It's almost like money doesn't buy happiness.
Maybe not, but it does make things a little easier when you have to put in a new roof.
Yeah. So why does Sandra throw in the letters in the pool, but out of order? That's nuts.
Yeah, well, it seemed like maybe she should have thrown them all in at the same time, like she does with the ashtrays.
Or in order. Because at least then by the MAU, you're going to,
Yeah. Like, who is Warner?
Yeah. Also, she steals a lot of ashtrays. There was like 12 ashtrays at the bottom of that pool.
Yeah, that was a lot of ashtrays, and a lot of bathrobes, and a lot of towels.
She stole so many ashtrays, they had to buy new ashtrays and change the design.
Yes, and not logo them.
I also was a little confused because the dogs, I felt should have realized that she killed Lavinia, and they seem to be very tolerant of her.
Eric, they're Labradors. They love everybody. Labradors are the happiest dogs you could have.
Labradors are lovely. They're very lovely dogs. But I was just as like, they must have loved. Maybe they only loved James.
Yeah. Well, they wanted to be with James, even though he was trying to hide.
So stylistically, the episode did two things in the reveal that it always bugs me when they do this. So we see both the Marjorie and the Ginny murders, and we see longer encounters than what we've kind of been shown in what we actually watched previously. So we see, like at the beginning, we see Marjorie call out who's there, and then within a couple seconds, we hear a scream and the falling of the body.
Mm-hmm.
And then with Ginny's murder, we see her coming out of the water. What are you doing here? And then we see her get cracked in the head with the ashtray. Now, in the reveal, we see that there was longer scenes where Sandra was communicating with both of them that they obviously hide because you would know who the killer is. I always kind of hate that. I feel it's like a little bit of a cheat.
Yes, they did that as well in The Maiden Splendor, and it is a bit of a cheat, I feel, as well.
They've done that in a few things. It's a common thing they do. It's not, and other mystery shows have done it. I just find it's like a bit of a cheat, and if you're going to do that, we don't need to see we don't need to see the actual murder scene then.
Yeah, because what you can do, and what they I think is more successful, is they just show the person coming in, and then later on the body is discovered.
Yeah. That said, in that, I will say, is that murder sequence of Ginny's murder, the cinematography was very strong between the sort of her diving in and out of the water, the knocking of her head, kind of the splashing back into it was very well done. And I actually thought this whole episode was both well written and well shot.
I did too. And of course, anytime you have a dead body in a swimming pool, you are immediately brought to Sunset Boulevard and the opening scene there. And the way they did it did bring it, but that made it its own, because what it brought it took it from underneath the water with the blood spreading, and then you get that overhead shot of the body. And I thought that was very effective.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of really effective stuff. Like, first of all, let's just talk about the story itself. The writing, I thought, was very clean, simple, linear story. There wasn't really a lot. There wasn't really any kind of like extraneous character bits. There wasn't really any details that kind of got forgotten about. Everything pushes forward to the solution.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just an example of a perfectly written Midsomer episode.
Yes. I think the writing is very strong on this one. It had enough funny stuff to keep you knowing that you're in Midsummer Land and not to take things too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
But also there was the Tamsin story was very sad in many ways. And the fact that she gets a happy ending with Harry, it's nice. It is nice.
It is. Other things that caught my eye, obviously, the explosion at the beginning, which had stunt work.
Yes.
We never see stunt work.
Except for falling bodies, which a lot of times are obviously not real stuntmen or anything. Because, poor Lavinia, that was obviously not a real body when it hit the ground.
But I thought the stunt work was great. I actually thought when you see Marjorie's body, the blood spatter, was very artistic. It didn't look like real blood spatter, but it looked very artistic.
Yeah.
I thought there was some nice camera, like the Lavinia murder, the handheld camera going up the stairs in a nice kind of creepy, naturalistic body movement way.
Yeah.
And as well as the shot, the camera kind of, her POV of her falling to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
I thought was also very clever. A lot of really solid cinematography. I
agree.
And then I loved the little extraneous theremin sound that just would pop up in the music during the James chase scene.
Yeah.
When Sandra's chasing James throughout the manor, the music, it's very Midsummer music, but then all of a sudden you just hear the wow, that creepy theremin.
Theremins are kind of creepy.
Yep.
I will say, and this happens in pretty much every movie, TV show, when they have a car that catches on fire, they explode, which really doesn't happen.
How do you know?
Well, because I've read about that, and I've seen burning cars on the side of the road, and at a gas station.
How many burning cars have you seen, Eileen?
More than I would like to say.
That sounds like a real problem, Eileen, because I can tell you right now, I haven't seen that many burning cars.
You don't spend nearly as much time on the road as I do.
Sounds to me like you're driving around burning cars.
I'm just driving around a lot.
Only one real strange kill in this episode, if you call getting hit in the head with an ashtray strange.
But I did like Bullard's take on the message that was being sent there.
Hey kids, don't smoke. The death of Ginny also had that really powerful line from Barnaby when he discovers the body. Make the phone call, Troy.
Yeah.
Detective work. Barnaby really seemed to bond with Harry in this episode.
He did, and I think he did it reluctantly because he didn't want to like him. But you have to like Harry. Harry was very likable.
Yeah. I mean, he gives up confidential information on the investigation to Harry at one point.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking the stock market thing. He admits to something about Tamsin in the middle of an interrogation. I was like, I don't think you should be doing that. Also, did you notice that when Harry was like looking up the stock thing, he was pounding on that keyboard?
That was a 90s keyboard. They were very loud.
They were not that loud. He was just like dang 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 dang.
The Foley guy got really excited about doing that one.
Yeah, that was kind of nuts. We got a lot of Troy in this episode.
This was a good Troy episode.
Mm-hmm. I almost think they might have given him a little too much to do in this episode.
But he is the one who actually figures everything out because he discovers that that Sarah can hear everything that has been going on in the office, and that solves the case.
He uncovers the most vital clue. That was a great, and he got a good job, Troy. Which,
yeah,
And we also had a couple of moments where we find out he is scared of heights. Where I don't believe, like, we're in the 5th series here. He's clearly been on the roof of a few things.
Yeah,
I don't recall this ever being a thing before.
And I remember one episode he climbs up some kind of ladder with with Cully, and that didn't seem to bother him. To be honest, I think that's the one thing that could have been taken out of the episode, is that he did not need to be afraid of heights. It doesn't add anything.
No.
It's never mentioned again. And those are probably not very convincing scenes, to be honest.
Well, also the scene where he's kind of like, he runs into the Lord, who's like trying to wallpaper a thing and doesn't realize it's the Lord, and talks kind of down to him a little bit.
Yeah, talks to him like he's a tradesman, yeah.
So here's my personal theory is we are kind of approaching the time when Daniel Casey leaves the show. And I feel like he might have been like, hey, I'm going to be leaving. Can we get more character things? Can I show more of my range? Because, like I said, he's afraid of heights. He solves the case. He's got that weird scene with the Lord. And then, of course, we find out that in this episode that Troy has been collecting a comic book series called The Hawk. It has every single issue from even since he was a child. By the way, I saw that and I was like, well, what kind of comic book is that? And that is a very British style comic from like the 50s, 60s, and 70s. A lot of British comic book books were kind of printed in that way. They looked more like comic strips than comic books. That I thought, oh, that's an interesting little detail. But we also just see that he is clearly a obsessive collector as opposed to just a fan by all the little subtle things he does by making sure smoothing out the cover, making sure it stays in pristine condition. He even does it to the Lord's issue of The Hawk.
Yes, I saw that. And we did kind of go back and forth on this because in the season 20 episode, Drawing Dead, Jamie Winter shows up in a costume that looks very bird-like. In fact,
well, that's the comic book convention episode.
Yeah, that's and Fleur makes a joke about him looking like a chicken, but he looks like a hawk in that one.
Yeah, they don't near as we can find, they don't really rename it could be the Hawk. There's no name of the character. He never kind of says, I am going as this character. I also kind of feel like if the Hawk has been published in the UK for at least 30, 40 years, he's probably a known quantity.
Yeah.
He has to explain to Barnaby who the Hawk is. Yeah, Barnaby would know.
Well, if it is the one that Winter is dressed as, it is from this very limited series that's very known amongst the collectors, but not necessarily outside of that group, because they were very small printings that makes them very valuable.
Yeah, although where in the Comic Book Con episode?
Yes, and Drawing Dead.
Yeah, but I'm saying is like the Hawk has clearly been published for 20-something years. At this point, it's a known quantity. It would be at newsstands. It would Barnaby knows what the Hawk is. Maybe.
You seem to think that people know comics better than they do.
Do you know who Batman is?
I know who Batman is, but Batman and Superman, I don't know anything much beyond that.
You just named two of them.
And Wonder Woman. Yeah, because those were...
Keep going.
But those were very mass market. They were distributed widely. This is not something that was distributed
We found the Hawk at the newsstand in a small English village.
Yeah, but he had to get it, but it was still... They say in Drawing Dead that it's a very limited production.
Well, whatever Winter is on about, but Troy, as Troy points out at the beginning, he has been collecting. It's a limited thing doesn't last 20 years. He has been collecting every issue of the Hawk. They are valuable enough that he can sell, which was a beautiful reversal of fortune and a punctuation on Barnaby giving him grief about pensions and the childish thing of the Hawk. Well, the childish thing of the Hawk is putting Troy in a very, very smart financial position, and Barnaby is toast.
But Barnaby does retire in a few years.
But God knows what he's doing for money. Because Joyce is doing classes. That costs.
Yes, but Joyce probably took a class on investing and is secretly sitting on a stash of money.
How funny would it be if Joyce was the secret member? Maybe in the Midsomer universe, the Hawk is sort of the British Batman or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I also feel like the winner in the costume was a subtle, like, in-joke Easter egg for the super fans.
Yeah, that was a 15 season long game there.
Yep. So speaking of Joyce, we don't get a lot of her in this episode, but she does help Barnaby turn a letter over.
And she puts the letters around in order. She sees it more than he does.
Yeah, which, again, not great with money and apparently not great with spelling.
And let's face it, Joyce figures out a major clue. Troy basically solves the case by finding the key clue. What does Barnaby do in this episode?
Go broke.
Yeah, he goes broke.
Final thoughts.
I think that, as we've said, I think this is a really, really well done episode. I think it has one of the most memorable villains, the most memorable murders, which, when you see people talk about it, she's one of the ones that comes up as she was just plain evil.
Mm-hmm.
And she's so deluded. And I credit this to the actress, because I think the progress that her character makes through the show really makes you accept it when it comes to her being the murderer.
See, I don't take it as she's evil. I take it she's in love. Or she's in whatever her idea of love is, or social standing. Because it's clearly for her love. She marries the doctor. It's not high enough. The Lord all of a sudden gives her some attention. It must be love. It's not high. Also, what did she do to get that doctor, and who's dead?
Yeah. She's
clearly unbalanced.
Yeah.
And it was rooted not in evil. It was rooted in jealousy and love. Again, that Midsomer, like, jealousy, obsession often leads to murder, multiple murder. But I didn't take her as evil.
I think there's a lot of insecurity with her as well.
Yeah.
Because she, like Tamsin, had come from a very lower class background, and it's constantly being rubbed in her face that her father was a bookie. And she seems to let it just wash off her back, but it doesn't. It really gets under her skin.
Oh, I never thought it washed off her back. She was really good at playing it subtle.
Yeah. Yeah. She said that it didn't matter, but it obviously was making, and the subtlety that she brings to that role really made you see that.
I thought it's a well done episode, written, shot, acted.
Yeah.
Great Barnaby and Troy moments, great lines. Balance of the weird and the mystery was perfect. If you want a perfect encapsulation of what Midsomer Murders is supposed to be, this episode, I think, really does it.
Yes, and I think it balances the happy ending of Tamsin and Harry with that scene you get with the doctor as he's tearing up the invitation that was so important to her, but he didn't realize was so important to Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
And again, beautifully shot as the pieces are falling into the trash can. It's very sad because you see the opposite trajectory of these two women who had very similar backgrounds.
Yeah. See, Sarah didn't need a lord. She needed a pool man.
She needed a pool man.
It was nice to see a sexy, smart pool man, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Does well for himself. Although you got to wonder about a pool guy who's sitting there cleaning a pool in denim jacket and jeans.
It is England. It's not that warm.
They all got pools.
They're heated.
That's everything we wanted to talk about. We want to thank everyone for listening to us. If you had something you wanted to discuss about Market for Murders or Midsomer Murders, feel free to email us at welcometomidsomer@gmail.com. If you want us to use the email in the show, just say so in your email. We got a lovely email this week from a listener who actually had a suggestion about adding the series and episode numbers to all of our descriptions, which we're going to use. Thank you so much for that. We really appreciate it. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. We are now on Threads at Welcome to Midsomer on all of those things. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to us or rate and review us on iTunes. It helps people find us. Tell all your friends about us. We will be back soon with another episode. We hope you will join us again. And as we take the road out of Midsomer, we want to thank you for listening and remind you that in Midsomer, talking to a potentially unstable person 10 years ago, causing them to create an elaborate scenario inside their own mind, can be murder.
Wow.
Welcome to Midsomer is produced by Eric Buscher and Eileen Becker. All clips in this podcast are used in compliance with the U.S. Copyrights Act fair use exception for criticism and commentary. Our logo and podcast art was designed by Smeedrai. Our theme music is by the infamous Space. Leigh made her stage debut at the age of 14 in the play The Burning Bit. Oh.
PG-13 there. Eamon Gagin appeared in the role of Barman. Second.
Barman.